Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host, with another marvelous video. Phoenix Force and the X-Men universe go hand in hand. I mean, who doesn't remember Jean Grey taking on the Dark Phoenix role and fighting against her friends? It was such a cathartic battle, and certainly this was something that we as fans needed to witness to truly realize the power that Phoenix Force gives to its hosts. Now, over the years, there have been several hosts, and I mean several. In this video, we'll take a look at all the people who have been chosen or unwillingly ended up becoming the host for this force and how that ended up for them. Some of them ended up becoming really good hosts who had a nurturing relationship with the Phoenix Force, while others, not so much. So, strap in and find out who ended up as what. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
It was Jean. She caused the explosion.
What is the Phoenix Force? The universe has one thing constant, and that is energy. Energy is something that can't be destroyed. It can only change itself from Form A to Form B. One such energy is the Phoenix Force. It's one of the oldest cosmic entities, a manifestation of the universal force of life. It's considered to be the spark that creates life and the flames that consume it. It's the nexus of all psionic energies that exist in the multiverse and in between them. The heart of the Phoenix Force is considered to be the white-hot room, and this is where the Phoenix Force brings all the potential candidates before it decides on its next vessel. Jean Grey. So when it comes to the host of Phoenix Force, the first one whose name comes up is Jean Grey. None of the hosts had the opportunity to know about the Phoenix Force the way she has. At first, when the Phoenix Force came across Jean Grey, it imprinted itself on her. So, when Jean Grey was almost dying trying to protect her friends in X-Men, the Phoenix Force showed up as the savior. It replaced Jean Grey and joined the X-Men in her place while keeping her sealed in this healing cocoon, where she stayed until she woke up from a coma. Once she woke up, she had memories of the Phoenix version of herself. This definitely brought the two closer. She was even resurrected by the Phoenix Force. However, when Jean realized that she wasn't meant to be the Phoenix, she and the Phoenix Force parted ways amicably. Logan. As surprising as it may be, Logan also had his fair share of run-ins with the Phoenix Force. In Thor 2018, we see King Thor's adventure as he travels through time to face off against Gore, the God Butcher, in order to save his universe. While Thor is struggling to keep everything balanced out, Wolverine shows up, but this time, Wolverine is not just the adamantium claw-wielding mutant, he's also the Space Ronin. Using the Phoenix Force that he now has, Logan nurtured the cosmos in its last days before things ended. However, as Logan and Thor worked on nurturing the universe in its dying days, there was a problem. That problem was none other than Victor Doom. Doom had decided to attain a lot of formidable powers and be the biggest roadblock on the path to success for our heroes. Doom was now the Sorcerer Supreme, Iron Fist, and even embodied the star brand and spirit of vengeance. With so much power at his disposal, Doom quickly became a very formidable opponent who was hard to beat. To beat this Victor Von Doom, Logan decided to make the ultimate sacrifice. He put all of his Phoenix Force and amalgamated it within the Mjolnir, making the Mjolnir essentially a supercharged weapon. Using this, the two heroes were able to save the day. Cyclops. When it comes to Scott Summers, he also had his run-in with the Phoenix Force. It wasn't like he was chosen by the Phoenix Force to be its host. Instead, it was more because of a side effect of a weapon that his teammates had created. All of them fell to the power, and Scott was the last one standing. The goal of the Phoenix Five was to make a utopia with food and no war. This goal, while a very nice goal to have made Scott tunnel-visioned, in turn corrupted him and turned him into the Dark Phoenix. He was saved by Wanda Maximoff and Hope Summers. There's another instance where he becomes the host of Phoenix Force. This was before the incursions of Earth 616 and Ultimate 1610 universes, and there were secret wars. Scott had a Phoenix Egg, which he used to get the Phoenix Force. Even though he had the Phoenix Force after the end of all the universes, he was still defeated and killed off by Doctor Doom, who had the powers of the Beyonders. Storm. Jean Grey has been the longtime partner of Phoenix Force, and we know how that ended up for her. But what if someone else was chosen to be the host by the Phoenix Force? In the What If Marvel story arcs, this was explored with the host being Storm. Now, Storm is a powerful mutant overall. With her ability to control the weather and everything, she was quite the force to be reckoned with. But when you add Phoenix Force to the equation, she's definitely stronger than what we expected her to be. In the story arc we're referring to, once she became the Phoenix Storm, Storm was basically uncontainable. However, with great powers come great responsibilities, and soon enough the power corrupts her. She went from Phoenix Storm to Dark Phoenix Storm, and the whole X-Men team had to band together to get the Phoenix Force out of her. Overall, if we had to talk about Storm as the host for the Phoenix Force, we wouldn't recommend it, no, at all. Emma Frost. Jean Grey and Emma Frost both have one thing in common when it comes to the Phoenix Force. They both have a long, drawn-out history with the cosmic entity. She played one of the key roles when it came to the corruption of Jean Grey and the appearance of the Dark Phoenix that we know so well. In the Phoenix End song, she was possessed by the Phoenix Force, and in the Phoenix War song, Emma played a key role in the Force's reappearance. In this miniseries, the Force took over her students, the Stepford Cuckoos, and eventually destroyed all the clones that were made out of her DNA. However, we see her as the unwilling host of the Phoenix Force in the Avengers vs. X-Men story arc. Here, the Phoenix Raptor, a weapon developed by the Beast, backfired. When it backfired, it broke apart the Phoenix Force into several pieces. 5 to be exact. All of these 5 pieces latched onto whatever was nearby at the time. One piece latched onto Emma, making her the Phoenix Force host. Later in the story arc, the Phoenix Force is forcibly taken out of her by Scott Summers, also known as Cyclops, who had gone mad thanks to the influence the Phoenix Force had on him. Hope Summers. Now, we know about how Wanda Maximoff seemingly stopped the birth of all mutants after she uttered the words, "No more mutants." Well, Hope Summers was the first ever mutant who was born after those words were uttered, so clearly there was something special about her. Now, even though her name and physical appearance make it seem like she's the daughter of Summers and Grey, there's no genetic connection between Hope, Jean, and Scott. Hope was taken in by Cable, who took her to the future to make sure she wasn't killed by anyone. She was destined to be the messiah for mutants and humankind, so there were a lot of people who were after Hope, thinking she'd kill a lot of humans. However, it was revealed that she was actually born to be the host of the Phoenix Force. But Avengers and X-Men together tried their best to make sure she never came in contact with that. This led to the Phoenix 5 incident, which turned Namor, Scott Summers, Emma Frost, Colossus, and Magik into the hosts of the Phoenix Force. This led to them wanting to create a utopia for the mutants, which, however, backfired soon enough as the power slowly started corrupting them from within. That's when Hope was allowed to bond with the Phoenix Force, which led to her using the powers to heal the world and then discarding it once the work was done. Rachel Grey. Rachel Grey is the child of Scott Summers and Jean Grey in an alternate timeline known as Earth 811. Since her birth, Rachel showed a connection with the Phoenix Force that was a little strange. Rachel was born with her mother's abilities, such as telepathy and telekinesis. However, the power of the cosmic entity definitely flowed through her, and it was made evident over time as we watched her use the Phoenix Force to augment her telepathic and telekinetic abilities. Rachel is also one of the very few hosts who never succumbed to the Dark Phoenix. However, when it comes to the adventures of Rachel as the Phoenix host, they're quite short-lived. In the X-Men Kingbreaker miniseries, we see her lose almost all of her Phoenix Force, as it's assumed that Jean is trying to collect all the fragmented parts of the Phoenix Force to make it whole again. However, Rachel treated the Phoenix Force as a separate entity, and because of this, the relationship that the Force had with her was quite healthy and nurturing. At points, we see the Phoenix Force act like the caretaker of Rachel, and we love that for them. Madelyne Pryor. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Sinister made a clone of Jean Grey to use that clone for his evil plans. That clone is Madelyne Pryor. Now, Madelyne never truly gained access to all of Phoenix Force the way Jean did. However, she had quite a bit of power thanks to the shard of the Phoenix Force in her. While this shard didn't give her the host abilities that Jean had, this shard was the sole reason why Madelyne woke up in the first place and had Jean's mutant abilities. Eventually, we see that she also had quite the talent when it comes to the magical abilities of Asgardian origins, which we see her use to warp realities. Eventually, Madelyne dies, and that leads to Mr. Sinister making 6 more versions of the character to help contain the Phoenix Force in the Avengers vs. X-Men. However, these were eventually destroyed by the cosmic entity itself. Firehair. Phoenix 1 million. BC. The first ever time the cosmic entity known as the Phoenix Force chose a human as a vessel is definitely something noteworthy. And what do you know? The vessel it chose was a young girl with flaming red hair. So, this young girl, the first ever human Phoenix Force host, came to be referred to as Firehair. She took on the responsibilities of gathering all the Avengers of 1 million BC, and eventually she became Odin's lover. In a shocking twist of fate, we find out that she's actually Thor's mother. Well, this makes a lot of sense because when we see her again in the story arc where she and the Avengers together battle against Mephisto and Doctor Doom, she's referred to as Thor's mother repeatedly. She's also the one who inspired Echo to form an emotional bond with the Phoenix Force instead of wielding it as a weapon of mass destruction. Firehair is definitely a very worthy Phoenix Force host. Ohoyo Luak, the Phoenix of 1050 CE. When we look into the past, we get to see several Phoenix hosts who we couldn't even imagine having existed. One such host is Ohoyo Luak. She lived in Cahokia, and we see her in the Phoenix's Song Echo miniseries. Maya Lopez is a descendant of Ohoyo Luak, and she is the future Phoenix Force host. In the miniseries, Maya travels back in time and meets with Ohoyo, who teaches her something that is truly a breath of fresh air. Phoenix Force is the force that creates and destroys. It's not a force to be meddled with. It's a huge power, and when it resides in a human, usually we see the host trying to control it and contain it. However, Ohoyo was the one who embraced the Phoenix Force in its full glory. This led to the Phoenix Force showing Ohoyo the wonders that it can do, and this advice to embrace the power instead of fighting it is something Ohoyo passed on to Maya as well. When we see Maya's journey as a Phoenix Force host, we can clearly see how Ohoyo's words have affected her. Professor X. Professor X is definitely a strong mutant, even if he is trapped in his wheelchair. But when he got the Phoenix Force, he ended up blowing apart our expectations. So he wasn't a host of the Phoenix Force for a really long time. However, when he did, he was extremely, and I mean extremely, powerful. His telepathic abilities increased 100-fold, if not 1,000-fold. He was able to fly faster than the lights. He could shoot cosmic energy and consume energy at a scale that would terrify even the strongest of mutants. As the Phoenix Force happens to be an all-encompassing power, it made his telepathic abilities so vast that he could go toe-to-toe with Rachel Summers, who, you know, was a very powerful telepath and telekinetic. She was also the host of the Phoenix Force at the time, so you can imagine how strong Professor X truly became. If he turned to the dark side, things would be pretty much over for anyone who stood in his way, and you know it. Magneto. Magneto is one of the scariest villains in the X-Men universe. In Earth 616, he just has his mutant abilities and looks at all the ruckus he created. So you can imagine how life was when on Earth 113776, this man ended up with the Phoenix power. So on this Earth, Hope Summers was there, and she was supposed to be the host of the Phoenix Force. Magneto was supposed to train Hope, but he did it because he wanted to be the one in control of the Phoenix Force. So he repeatedly pushed Hope to cross her limits and stretch her boundaries as the host. Eventually, the power was too much for her to control. When that happened, Magneto killed her in cold blood and took the power for himself. This cosmic power ended up becoming his, and he was a force that required Professor X, Hulk, and Wolverine to take down after several fatal blows. Colossus. After Deadpool 2, there are very few Marvel fans who don't know who Colossus is. The humongous mutant who can turn his skin into steel with a thick Russian accent is pretty hard to miss, honestly. Colossus usually stayed pretty far away from the whole Phoenix Force business, except the one time he was unwillingly made a ghost of it. In the Avengers vs. X-Men arc, where the Beast's weapon backfired, the Phoenix Force broke down into 5 pieces. These pieces latched onto 5 individuals, giving rise to the Phoenix 5. Colossus happened to be one of them. At first, he used his power for good. However, soon enough, his power was corrupted. Peter Parker did some prodding. Colossus and his sister Magik turned on one another, leading to them losing their powers. Namor. Namor is one of the first mutants to appear in the printed Marvel comics, including Volume 1. So, in the Marvel Universe, he's quite an old character, chronologically appearance-wise speaking. Now, when it comes to Namor, he's a little different. You see, Namor is half Atlantean and half human. This combination, with the added advantage of having the X gene, makes Namor quite the character. Since 1939, Namor has reigned as that one man who's stronger than average Atlanteans and made a mark in the minds of the fans with his power of flight. Now, in the Avengers vs. X-Men series, when the weapon that Beast made backfired and broke the Phoenix Force into 5 different shards, one of the shards grabbed onto Namor because he was the closest one to the machine. The power of Phoenix can either manifest as good or as bad. When it came to Namor, it manifested as Dark Phoenix, which led to Namor attacking Wakanda. This led to the Avengers attacking him and expelling the Phoenix Force out of him. Nightcrawler. If there's one X-Men who you can recognize very easily, it has to be Nightcrawler. He's such a genuinely nice and relatable character to follow in the X-Men franchise. His struggles with interpersonal relationship honestly are a big mood, and we appreciate how he navigates them. Now, when it comes to Nightcrawler, he never had a close call with the Phoenix Force, not like Scott or Jean did. However, you know how Marvel works. There's always an alternate universe where things play out a little differently, and things go off a little differently. There's a What If comic series where Nightcrawler ended up becoming the host of the Phoenix Force. In this What If universe, the second generation of X-Men never joined, and there were not a lot of people to stop Phoenix Force. So, eventually, Nightcrawler became the host. His life as the Phoenix Force host didn't go well, because he turned into the Dark Phoenix and eventually ended up sacrificing his life for the best of the Earth. Magik. One of the characters who are often seen with the X-Men is Magik. She's the sister of Colossus, the Russian X-Man who can turn his skin into steel. Magik herself has the power of teleportation, and she can control this dark, underworld-esque realm known as the Limbo. However, despite being such a cool and reliable character, Magik wasn't chosen by the Phoenix Force to be its host in the Avengers vs. X-Men story arc, where Beast made a weapon to blast the Phoenix Force away. However, on being blasted, the Force was broken down into shards, and one of the shards latched onto Magik, making her the host of Phoenix Force to a certain degree. However, her career as a Phoenix Force host was short-lived because, soon enough, her power was corrupted, and it was taken out of her and given to the rest of the teammates who were hosts. Echo. Maya Lopez, better known as Echo from the Daredevil series, is also a host of the Phoenix Force. She was chosen to participate in the tryouts for the next host of the Phoenix Force, and even though she failed at the said tryout against Namor, the Phoenix Force resurrected her because it liked the way Maya viewed the Force. As Maya is a Native American herself, she often related the Phoenix Force with the Thunderbird, a bird of fire that would bring the change that is very much needed. This emotionality that Maya had attached to the Phoenix Force is what drew the Force to her in the first place. Once she became the host, she used the power in a rather creative way, which truly showed off just how unique she is as a Phoenix Force host. In the story arc where she faces off against Mephisto with Firehair and Old Man Logan, Firehair is the one who taught Echo to look at the Phoenix Force as a force of love instead of a force of destruction. This was something that stayed with Echo, and she used the memories of everything that she loved to win the fight against the Dark Phoenix. This emotional connection she has with the Phoenix Force is a very fresh take on the host-force relationships, and we can see why the Phoenix Force chose her as the host. Quentin Quire. Omega-level mutants are the strongest mutants in the X-Men universe. Quentin Quire is one such mutant. He's the strongest telepath that the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning has ever seen. He was first introduced in the 134th issue of New X-Men, and since his introduction, there have been 2 instances where he was revealed to be the next host for the Phoenix Force. The first instance was in the 154th issue, where Quentin was present in the titular White Hot Room, the place where the souls of the previous hosts reside. In the Battle of the Atom story arc, we get to see a Phoenix Force-powered Quentin Quire who traveled from the future into the present. In the mighty Thor 19, Quentin absorbed a part of the Phoenix Force to stop a contest between the gods, and he used the Phoenix Force to activate Jubilee's mutant gene, something Scarlet Witch had deactivated. Fongji. Not much is known about Fongji, even though she was the red-haired girl who became the Iron Fist and saved the world by hosting the Phoenix Force. In the 25th issue of New Avengers Volume 2, we learn about Fongji. This was amid the Avengers vs. X-Men arc that led to the formation of Phoenix 5. Fongji was mentioned as the host of the Phoenix Force from a few centuries ago. Her arrival was prophesied, and the strangest part about her is that her father is not from Kunlun. Now, while it's true that Fongji shares a striking resemblance with Jean Grey, particularly because of the red hair, there's no confirmation whether or not they're in the same family tree. As far as the introduction being such a secretive business is considered, it's because after Fongji saved the world being the Iron Fist, her identity was kept as a secret, and she was only introduced because the Earth was again threatened by the Phoenix Force coming back. While not much about her and her legacy is known, there's one thing that she made very clear. Thanks to her, we now know that the Phoenix Force has a vulnerability to the powers of the Iron Fist. Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards is the son of Reed Richards and Sue Storm in Earth 616. In that timeline, he's a really good guy. He sacrifices a lot of his powers to set the multiverse, and he's willing to sacrifice himself for the greater good. However, its counterpart in Earth 81122 is not the same. On this Earth, Franklin decided to join the X-Men and go 20 years back in time to help in the rebellion against his own parents. Now, during this rebellion, at one point, Jean Grey, who's the host of Phoenix Force, was captured and tortured in the End Zone facility. While there, it's assumed that Franklin took the Phoenix Force for himself, betraying his X-Men teammates. He was only subdued when Reed from the past decided to use the tiny promise device that he made to get rid of Franklin and Sue's powers. This led to the Phoenix Force returning back to the original host, which is Jean Grey of the past. Cassandra Nova. Cassandra Nova Xavier is the twin sister of Charles Xavier, better known as Professor X. In the Earth 41001, she's pretty much the bad guy. She orchestrated the Shi'ar attacks on the X-Men because she wanted to gain control over Jean Grey and, by proxy, the Phoenix Force. She wanted to bond with the Phoenix Force herself and use it to destroy pretty much everything in existence. Even though she managed to bond with the Phoenix Force after a lot of big brain moves, she wasn't able to actually wipe out all existence. It's because Jean and Psylocke subdued her. Jean then used her connections to the Phoenix and brought about a host of X-Men, both dead and alive, to make one universe and send others back to Earth. Charles tells Cassandra that he's scared of her, and then Jean becomes a part of the universe along with all the resurrected X-Men. So yeah, Cassandra didn't pass the vibe check of being a host for the Phoenix Force. Rock-Shear. When it came to being the host of the Phoenix Force, there's no mandatory thing about it being a strictly human race business. That's why Rock-Shear being the host is not that surprising. Rock-Shear is a part of the Shi'ar alien race. When it came to him, his method of controlling the Phoenix Force was very different from the way we've seen other characters use the Phoenix Force. For Rock-Shear, he needed to use his blade to use the Phoenix Force, which was aptly named the Blade of Phoenix. Now, he eventually went up against the Imperial Guards and got beaten. However, the Shard of Phoenix Force remained in his blade, which was said to be only wielded by people in his bloodline. Corvus. Corvus is the last remaining member of the Rock-Shear bloodline. That's why he was able to use the Blade of Phoenix and, by proxy, the Phoenix Force. Initially, Corvus was given the Blade of Phoenix and a mission to kill off Rachel Grey. However, when he met her, they bonded over their shared grounds, Phoenix Force. This led to both of them developing soft corners for one another and eventually getting entangled in a romantic relationship. However, this relationship didn't last for remotely long enough, and soon, in the X-Men Kingbreakers, we see the Shard of the Phoenix Force leave the Blade. Not only that, the part of Phoenix Force that was present in Rachel Grey also left her. This is assumed to be because Jean Grey was trying to gather all the scattered remains of the Phoenix Force to make it whole again. Prime. In the Phoenix Resurrection Genesis comic, we see the Phoenix in search of a new host as it enters the Earth 93060 again. However, the problem is that right before it enters Earth, it's hit with a ray that torches it. The X-Men stand there, helplessly wondering how they can help the Phoenix. However, as it's evident from the face that they know the Phoenix, the hero of this Earth, Kevin Green, better known as Prime, decided to show up and rough them up. He felt like the Phoenix was a sign of a bad omen, and the X-Men were the ones who brought it to this Earth in the first place. So, Prime decides to attack Wolverine and the rest of the X-Men in search of some answers. However, before he can get anything out of them, the Phoenix falls into the Earth and decides to enter Prime, picking him as his host. At first, Prime takes on the Phoenix Prime form and attacks the X-Men with new vigor. However, the power overwhelmed him quickly enough. The X-Men have to hold him down as he wrestles with the Phoenix himself. Finally, he can expel the Phoenix Force out of him, which leaves him completely exhausted. Prime mentions that he felt violated as the Phoenix Force chose him as its host and showed him the horrific ends and beginnings that the Force brings with itself. So, as a host, Prime definitely didn't have a good time. Diamanda Nero. In Earth 4935, the Apocalypse was the all-encompassing being. He had a power similar to that of the Phoenix Force, which allowed him to rule North America for roughly 100 years without being challenged. Anyone who dared to go against him was killed off, whether it was a human or a mutant. Apocalypse led the Prelates and the Canaanite army, and after a while, when the time was right, he sired a daughter. That was Diamanda Nero. She soon climbed the ranks and became the Viceroy. As for Apocalypse, he was burning through the host bodies extremely quickly, and soon enough, Nero became the host for the powers he had and became the authority figure. Rachel Summers, the host of the Phoenix Force, decided to oppose Nero and her powers but was soon captured. Rachel was forced to release the Phoenix Force, and Nero, in her power-hungry state, decided to absorb all of it. But when she realized how the power was affecting her, she begged Rachel to release her from the Phoenix Force. This led to Rachel releasing the power from Nero into the cosmos, stripping Nero completely of everything she had, leaving her with survival gears and rations before leaving her. Amber Hunt. Starting off as a normal high school girl, Amber went through a lot of changes when she was affected by the Theta virus. The virus gave her the powers of flight and the power to engulf her body in flame, kinda like one of the Fantastic Four members. She's not in the Earth 616 universe though. She's a character from the Ultraverse universe. When Phoenix Force came into the Ultraverse to protect the Earth in this universe, it was looking for a host. The host it chose from this universe was Amber Hunt. This relationship, however, was not a long-term partnership. Despite the length of their relationship overall, it was a mutually beneficial one because the Phoenix Force wanted to save the Earth and Amber Hunt wanted to protect the Phoenix and the Earth. Vulcan. Gabriel Summers in Earth 8020 wanted a family. In this world, he was thrown into the Macron crystal instead of Professor X, and he drifted into the White Hot Room. He met Quentin Quire there along with several others, and even though Quentin warned him that Gabriel's hatred and rage wouldn't help him in his quest to be the Phoenix, Gabriel wasn't willing to listen. He killed pretty much everyone, except Alex and Rachel, who were able to flee. He ended up becoming the Phoenix and used the Phoenix Force to consume 6 galaxies. To stop him, Rachel went back to Earth and rallied a group consisting of her, Alex, Scott, and Cable, and met with Gabriel in Krakoa. Gabriel tried to kill them as well, but he couldn't because he really just wanted a family. Now that he had one, he decided to sacrifice himself because all his negative emotions were making the Phoenix Force consume all of reality along with him. He doesn't die and instead wakes up in the White Hot Room where Jean Grey tells him that she'll help him. Foxfire. Amber Rose of Earth 95431, better known as Firefox, is a progeny human hybrid, but she had no idea about it until she had a run-in with Amber Hunt. Amber Hunt of Earth 93060 was chosen to be the Phoenix Force host, which led to a full-on war. Some came to fight for the Phoenix Force, some came to save their worlds, while others came to save Amber. Amid the fight, Amber Rose's father got hurt and was buried under rubble. When Amber Rose tried to save him, she found out the true nature of her father and, by proxy, her own heritage. This led to her powers manifesting, and Rose was able to expel the Phoenix Force from Amber Hunt. This led to her passing out and waking up 50 years in the future, where Rose learned about her purpose and decided to fight against the progenies. Giroux of Haven. While the name isn't familiar to a lot of fans, Giroux of Haven is a character that we get to see in the Guardians of the Galaxy. He's a character who's introduced at first as a human, but later we learn that he has psi abilities. Now, the story is set in the 31st century, when mutants were almost extinct except for 9 people. That's why his turning out to be a mutant is something that's quite a shocker for people in this universe. Now, because of his psi abilities, the Phoenix Force showed a bias toward him. Starhawk, a friend of Giroux, sensed this strong force in the middle of the volcano and pointed it out to Giroux. That strong force was the Phoenix Force, and soon enough, Giroux was the Phoenix host. Once it had the most, the Phoenix Force, which was hungry, started feeding on the core of the planet Haven. This destroyed the planet eventually, but thanks to the telepathic, telekinetic, and teleportation abilities that the Phoenix Force gave Giroux, he was able to move the inhabitants of Haven to somewhere safe. As this was quite a dangerous situation, Giroux put inhibitors on the Phoenix Force to control it, but eventually, those came off whenever he needed to access the Phoenix Force. Celeste Cuckoo. So, when it comes to the new X-Men series, we were introduced to very important side characters, namely the Stepford Cuckoos. These Cuckoos were part of an anti-mutant program where thousands of psychics were used as a weapon that could erase pretty much every mutant with just thought itself. There were 5 Cuckoos, namely Celeste, Phoebe, Mindy, Sophie, and Esme. Throughout the story, Sophie and Esme are killed off, and the Phoenix Force realizes what a threat the Cuckoos are and drops by to save the Earth from the threat they pose. It took control of Celeste Cuckoo. By the end of everything, all the clones were dead except for the 3 sisters. Even though Sophie and Esme were brought back to life, they didn't stay in the living world for long. However, the most tragic part about this whole business is that these cookies were made out of the harvested eggs of Emma Frost, meaning all of them were her daughters. Demon Lords of Stasis. Phoenix Force has been around for a lot longer than we can even imagine. In the Uncanny X-Men issue 13, we learn about the first Phoenix host, who existed a billion years ago from this artificial intelligence called Unit. According to the Unit, there was a demon prince who did a lot of rites and rituals to stop evolution. Now, Phoenix Force, the cosmic force of change, birth, and evolution itself, didn't like that very much. So, it created a messiah of sorts and sent it to get rid of the Demon Lords of Stasis. If this whole thing sounds very familiar, then you'd be correct. As history repeats itself, there's a very striking telltale parallel between this event that happened a billion years ago and the M-Day that happened due to Wanda Maximoff. We can assume that the Phoenix Force itself might have played quite a huge part in the creation of Hope Summers, the mutant messiah. Grey King. Addison Falk, better known as the Grey King, is one of the X-Men who was created by Cerebro, using the files of present mutants. When you see her character design and powers, it's very clear that the biggest inspiration behind her creation was Jean Grey. As we all know, Jean Grey is the long-term Phoenix host in the X-Men universe, so, by proxy, in a way, Addison Falk also showed some sort of inclinations toward the Phoenix Force. Ink. Ink is a rude and loudmouthed teenager who is a young X-Men. While he's no mutant himself, he has access to a mutant tattoo artist who can give powers to someone based on whichever sign he tattoos. Ink goes to the tattoo artist and gets a symbolic representation of the power he wants to be tattooed on him. This leads to him being able to wield that power. At one point, the tattoo artist tattooed the Phoenix Force symbol on him. This led to him having Phoenix Force-esque powers, but he wasn't able to tap into the actual Phoenix Force powers. He used this power to revive his teammate Dust, which worked but left him completely catatonic. He later was seen recovered and as a part of the Jean Grey School. Ferron. Earth 148 had a very strong mage known as Ferron. As a mage, he was under the tutelage of Necrom, the sorcerer supreme of their race, along with his friend Merlin. Now, Necrom realized that if he could somehow align all the multiverses and tap into that network, he'd have an unlimited source of magical energy. With his students in tow, Necrom traveled to Earth 616, and Ferron decided to be the host for the Phoenix Force. Once Ferron had the Force, he used it to build ancient towers in each of the Earths over the multiverse to create a sort of network. In Earth 616, it's the Excalibur's lighthouse headquarters. Now, once all the towers were made, the magical energy was flowing seamlessly. However, that's when Necrom tried to separate Ferron from the Phoenix. This led to the formation of Anti-Phoenix, which Necrom took and fled. Merlin entered the energy network, took the powers as well, and fled. Ferron was left to his own devices, and even the Phoenix Force left him. Feeling guilt over the pain that he caused to the Phoenix Force, Ferron never went back to Earth 148. He stayed on Earth 616, awaiting Necrom's return and repenting his actions. Marvelous verdict, Phoenix Force is one of the strongest forces that has existed in the Marvel Universe, and with so many hosts, we were able to see several facets of the power. This power isn't something that can be messed around with, and the way some of the hosts have ended up, we know that for sure. So, Uncle Ben's statement of great powers and great responsibilities coming hand in hand still reigns true to this day. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.